The rain poured over Manhattan like an endless curtain, washing the streets in a silver haze. Midnight had just struck when the NYPD emergency line received a chilling call. There's been a murder. At East 72nd Street, apartment 14B, the caller whispered, his voice trembling. Before the dispatcher could ask questions, the line went dead. Detective Michael Hayes was already on night duty when the report came in. A veteran investigator with 15 years on the force, Hayes knew the city never really slept. Yet something about this call felt different. When he and his partner arrived at the upscale apartment building, the lobby was eerily quiet. A security guard claimed he hadn't seen anyone suspicious. The elevator carried them to the 14th floor, its fluorescent light flickering as though nervous itself. The door to 14B was unlocked. Hayes pushed it open slowly, gun drawn. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of cigar smoke and old paper. The living room was immaculate, almost staged, except for one horrifying detail. In the center of the polished hardwood floor lay the lifeless body of David Ross, a wealthy businessman known for his luxury real estate ventures and philanthropic image. Ross's tailored suit was stained with blood. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, frozen in shock. There were no signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no shattered glass. Whoever had done this had either been let in, or already belonged there. What caught Hayes' attention most was the antique typewriter sitting beside the corpse. A fresh page was still rolled inside, with a single line typed in bold letters, "The truth is never silent." Hayes crouched closer, scanning the room. No fingerprints were visible on the typewriter keys. The killer had been careful. Why leave a message? His partner muttered, "Because they want us to follow a trail." Hayes replied, "Or because they think we'll never figure it out." The medical examiner confirmed Ross had been dead for about an hour. Cause of death: a deep stab wound near the ribs, angled upward. The weapon was missing. Back at the precinct, Hayes couldn't stop thinking about the call. Whoever reported the crime hadn't left a name, yet had been close enough to the scene to describe it. Why would a killer dial 911 only to vanish? Hayes opened Ross's background file. The man was successful, yes, but also ruthless in business. He had plenty of enemies, ex-partners, disgruntled employees, and rivals who'd lost fortunes to his deals. Still, Ross had recently been trying to clean up his public image donations, charity events, a new political circle. The detective's gut told him this wasn't a robbery or a random act. This was deliberate, personal. Before dawn, Hayes reviewed the security camera feeds from the building, strangely between 11:30 p.m. and midnight, the suspected time of death. The hallway camera outside 14B showed nothing. No one entered, no one left. Either the system had been tampered with, or the killer had been inside long before. As Hayes closed the file, his eyes landed again on the haunting words from the typewriter. "The truth is never silent." Was it a taunt, a clue, or a confession? One thing was clear. This case was not going to be simple. And somewhere out in the storm-soaked city, a voice that had called in the crime was still watching. Morning light struggled to pierce through the gray Manhattan sky as Detective Michael Hayes stood over a stack of preliminary reports. Coffee in hand, he scanned the crime scene notes again. Nothing about the Ross apartment made sense. No forced entry, no missing valuables, just a body, a typewriter, and a cryptic message. Every murder leaves ripples, and Hayes knew the first suspects are always the ones closest to the victim. Emily Carter, the name at the top of the list, was Emily Carter, a corporate attorney with a sharp reputation. 2 years ago, she and David Ross had been partners on a development project that ended in a bitter legal battle. Emily claimed Ross had cheated her firm out of millions. The case settled, but not before she publicly vowed never to forgive him. She was brought into the precinct for questioning. Hayes observed her as she sat across the table, confident posture, but restless eyes. "I didn't kill him," Emily said before Hayes even asked the first question. I was at my mother's place in Brooklyn last night. Her alibi sounded rehearsed. A neighbor, however, complicated things by claiming to have seen Emily near Ross's building close to 11 o'clock. Hayes leaned forward. If you hated him so much, why go back? Her jaw tightened. I went there last week, yes, but not last night. Ross still had documents from our old case. I wanted them back, but I didn't kill him. She wasn't lying outright. Hayes had seen plenty of liars in his career. But she wasn't telling the whole truth either. Mark Lewis next on the list was Mark Lewis, Ross's longtime driver and personal aide. Mark had been with Ross for nearly a decade, loyal and dependable. But loyalty often turns sour when secrets are involved. According to Mark, he had gone home immediately after dropping Ross off at his apartment around 10:30. His phone records, however, placed him back near East 72nd Street close to midnight. Why were you in that area after you left him? Hayes asked. Mark shifted uncomfortably. I had a friend nearby. I stopped in to see her. What's her name? Mark hesitated, then muttered. She wouldn't want to be involved. Hayes's instincts sharpened. When suspects start protecting unnamed friends, it's usually a cover. The caller, and then there was the most puzzling piece. The unknown caller. Dispatch logs showed the 911 call originated from a payphone only 1 block from Ross's apartment. Payphones were nearly extinct in Manhattan, but that one still worked. Surveillance cameras in the area were either broken or deliberately disabled. Whoever the caller was, he had been close, maybe even watching as Ross died. Patterns emerging by late afternoon, Hayes pinned photos of Ross, Emily, and Mark on the board in his office. 3 faces, 3 potential motives. Emily had resentment and legal history. Mark had proximity and secrets. The caller had knowledge no one else did, but something nagged at him. The typewriter message, "The truth is never silent." It didn't feel like Emily's style. She was too direct, nor did it fit Mark, who barely knew how to type. This was the work of someone who wanted to be heard, someone with a flair for the dramatic. Hayes stared at Ross's photo. The man had lived a life of luxury, but wealth attracts enemies the way light attracts moths. Somewhere among Ross's tangled connections, a killer was hiding in plain sight. The phone on Hayes' desk rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was the lab report. No usable fingerprints on the typewriter, the technician said. But we did lift a partial print from the paper roller. Doesn't match the victim, Emily or Mark. Belongs to an unknown third party. Hayes set the phone down slowly. So there it was, another person. Someone they hadn't even considered yet had been in that room. The circle of suspects had just widened. Detective Michael Hayes was no stranger to lies. After 15 years of interrogations, he had learned that alibis were rarely airtight. They were patchwork stories stitched together with half-truths. And the Ross case was shaping up to be nothing but a quilt of contradictions. Emily's story unravels. Emily Carter insisted she'd been at her mother's home in Brooklyn. Her mother supported the claim, but when Hayes reviewed surveillance footage from a nearby deli, the truth bled through. At 11:15 p.m., Emily was clearly seen leaving the building in a taxi. When confronted, she admitted it. "Yes, I went out." She confessed, her voice sharp, but not to Ross's apartment. I needed air. My mother and I argued, and I couldn't sleep." Hayes studied her face. "You expect me to believe you went for a midnight taxi ride during a thunderstorm?" Emily's lips tightened. "Believe what you want, but I didn't kill David Ross." She was lying about something. Hayes could feel it. But was she lying about murder, or about something else she didn't want exposed? Mark Lewis's account crumbled even faster. The supposed friend he had visited denied seeing him at all. His story collapsed under pressure, and sweat collected on his brow as Hayes leaned in. "You were outside Ross's building near midnight," Hayes said. "If you didn't go inside, why not? You worked for him for years. Didn't it strike you odd that the man who signed your paychecks was bleeding out on his floor?" Mark's hands trembled. I was scared. I saw someone leaving. I didn't want to get involved." Hayes's ears pricked up. "Who?" But Mark clamped shut. Fear overrode loyalty. It wasn't much, but it confirmed one thing. Someone else had been at that apartment. The unknown print meanwhile, the lab dug deeper into the partial fingerprint on the typewriter's paper roller. It was incomplete, smudged, but it belonged to no one in their database, a ghost, a phantom player in the story. Hayes pinned the evidence to his board. Emily lied about her movements. Mark lied about his whereabouts. And now, a third person had surfaced in the form of a smudge. The caller returns that evening as Hayes sat in his office, nursing his third cup of coffee. The phone on his desk rang again. Not the precinct line, his personal phone. The voice was the same low whisper from before. "You're wasting time with Emily and Mark." The caller said they didn't kill Ross. He was silenced because of what he discovered. Hayes gritted his teeth. "Who is this? If you know so much, come forward." A dry laugh echoed. "If I come forward, I'm next. Look under the masks your city's leaders wear. Ross knew too much. That's why he died." The line went dead. Patterns of deception. Hayes sat back, staring at the board of suspects. The pieces weren't adding up. Emily had motive, but her lies felt more like fear of exposure than fear of justice. Mark was hiding something, but he wasn't clever enough to stage a crime scene with a typewriter message. No, this was bigger. Ross hadn't been killed in the heat of passion or revenge. He had been silenced. The message wasn't a taunt, it was a warning. Hayes scribbled a note under the typed words. "The truth is never silent. What truth?" If Ross had discovered something worth killing for, Hayes needed to uncover it before the killer struck again. The city outside his window hummed with neon and sirens, alive but restless. Somewhere in the endless sprawl of Manhattan, the person who murdered David Ross was still moving freely, still watching, and Hayes knew one thing: the alibis were only the beginning of the game. The following night, rain lashed against Hayes' office window as he reviewed his notes for the 100th time. Emily's shaky excuses, Mark's half-truths, and the phantom fingerprint. The case was a jigsaw puzzle with missing corners. At 9:47 p.m., Hayes' desk phone rang. Not the precinct line, again his private number. He answered carefully. "Hayes." The same hushed voice slithered through the receiver. "You're still circling the wrong prey, detective. Ross wasn't killed for betrayal or money. He was killed for knowledge." Hayes tightened his grip on the receiver. "If you know so much, then tell me who did it." A low chuckle followed. "I already told you. If I reveal myself, I'm next." Before Hayes could respond, the caller continued, voice urgent now. "Check under his desk. The answers hide in plain sight." The line clicked dead. The hidden files. Hayes wasted no time. Within an hour, he was back at Ross's apartment. The crime scene had been cleared. Yellow tape stretched across the doorway. Inside, the silence was suffocating. He went straight to the desk, a massive oak piece standing in Ross's study. Hayes crouched and ran his hands underneath. His fingers brushed against something taped to the underside, a thick manila envelope. Inside were documents, photographs, and financial statements. Hayes spread them across the desk, his eyes narrowing with each page. Ross had uncovered a network of money laundering and bribery schemes, linking high-ranking city officials, construction firms, and even a state senator. It was all here. Bank transfers, coded ledgers, secret meetings, and scrawled in Ross's handwriting across the top sheet, "If I disappear, it's because of this." Hayes exhaled slowly. This wasn't just a murder anymore. It was a cover-up. A bigger motive back at the precinct. Hayes briefed his captain, but the reaction was, "Restrained, too restrained. This is sensitive material, detective," the captain said, sliding the documents back into the envelope. "Chain of command dictates we pass this to internal affairs." Hayes frowned. "With respect, sir, if internal affairs gets it, it'll vanish. You know how deep this runs." The captain's jaw tightened. "Careful, Hayes. Sometimes digging too deep gets you buried." The warning rang louder than the words. Hayes left the office with the distinct feeling that his captain already knew what Ross had discovered. Threads of fear meanwhile, Emily Carter called the precinct demanding to speak with Hayes. When she arrived, she was pale, her confidence from earlier shattered. "I need protection." She blurted out, "I think someone's following me." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Why would anyone follow you?" Emily hesitated. "Because Ross told me something before he died. He said he had evidence, something that would change everything. And now I think whoever killed him thinks I have it." Hayes studied her. Was this genuine fear or another performance? Either way, she was now entangled deeper than before. A shadow over the case that night, Hayes pinned Ross's files to his investigation board. The photos of politicians, the bank ledgers, the cryptic typewriter message. It all painted a grim picture. Ross had been silenced not by personal enemies, but by powerful hands in the shadows. The typewriter words echoed in Hayes's mind, "The truth is never silent." If the caller was right, Ross had been eliminated because of these very files. Which meant the killer wasn't finished. Anyone connected to Ross, or to the investigation, could be next. Hayes stared out at the rain-swept cityscape. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of real danger pressing against him. This was no longer just about finding a murderer. It was about survival. Detective Michael Hayes barely slept. The files he'd pulled from under Ross's desk gnawed at his mind like restless wolves. Money laundering, bribes, a state senator's name scribbled in Ross's notes, and a warning written in Ross's own hand, "If I disappear, it's because of this." But the puzzle still had missing pieces. Who delivered the fatal blow? Who placed the typewriter, and who was the shadowy caller pulling Hayes deeper into the storm? Emily's breaking point at dawn, Hayes received another call, this time from Emily Carter. Her voice shook with panic. "They broke into my apartment," she whispered. "Everything's been ransacked. They were looking for something. I think they want Ross's files." Hayes drove across Brooklyn to find her apartment door splintered, drawers overturned, and fear etched into Emily's face. She clutched a half-burned envelope. "They didn't get this," she said. "Inside were photocopies of some of Ross's documents. He gave them to me 2 nights ago. Said if anything happened, I'd know why." It clicked. Ross had trusted Emily despite their legal battles. Maybe because he knew she wasn't corruptible, but that also made her a target. Mark's confession later that day. Hayes cornered Mark Lewis again. This time the driver crumbled under pressure. "I saw him." Mark admitted, tears brimming. "I saw Richard Hale leaving the apartment." The name chilled Hayes. Richard Hale, Ross's business partner of 15 years, a man with a spotless reputation, who stood to lose everything if Ross exposed the corruption. Mark continued, "He told me to keep my mouth shut. Said if I talked, I'd end up like Ross. I didn't call the cops. I couldn't, but someone else did." The unknown caller wasn't Mark, which meant another witness was still in the shadows. The confrontation that evening, Hayes obtained a warrant and confronted Richard Hale in his penthouse. Hale's charm barely masked the arrogance in his eyes. "You're chasing ghosts, detective," Hale said smoothly. "Ross was reckless. If he got himself killed, that's on him." Hayes placed the folder of Ross's files on the table. "These say otherwise. You were laundering money through dummy construction firms. Ross found out, and you silenced him before he could talk." Hale's mask cracked for a moment, just enough for Hayes to see the truth flicker. But then he smiled coldly. "You think those papers matter? You think anyone in this city will believe you over me?" Before Hayes could reply, Hale leaned closer. "Be careful, detective. The truth may not be silent, but people can be." The caller revealed as Hayes left the penthouse. His phone buzzed again, the same whispering voice. "You're close now," it said. Hayes snapped, "Who are you? Why keep hiding?" A pause, then, "I was Ross's accountant. I saw the books. When he told me what he planned to do, I knew they'd come for him. I made the call that night, but I couldn't stop it." Hayes's pulse quickened. "Testify. Put this on record." The voice trembled. "If I do, I'm dead." The line went dead for the final time. Justice armed with Mark's testimony, Emily's copies, and the files, Hayes built his case. It wasn't easy. Every step felt like pushing against a wall of influence and money, but persistence paid off. Richard Hale was indicted for murder and conspiracy. The trial was a media storm, dragging city officials and corporate giants into the spotlight. Hale denied everything, but the evidence mounted. In the courtroom, Emily testified with steady resolve. Mark wept as he described the night of the murder, and Hayes, though exhausted, presented the case with precision. Finally, after weeks of proceedings, the jury returned a verdict, guilty. Richard Hale was sentenced to life without parole. The echo of truth afterward, Hayes stood outside the courthouse, watching reporters swarm. Emily approached, her eyes heavy but determined. He thought silence would protect him. She said softly, "But in the end, the truth always speaks." Hayes nodded. The words from the typewriter still haunted him, but now they carried a different weight. The truth is never silent. Ross had paid the ultimate price for it, but in the end, his voice lived on through the files, through the witnesses, and through justice served. As Hayes walked into the restless hum of the city, he knew the battle against corruption was far from over. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, he felt the faintest spark of victory. Thanks for watching.